I have completely underestimated it. You just don't turn the page like this over such a long period of stress.
There's a price you'll eventually pay, and I am super excited to welcome today on this platform from Luxembourg, Paulette Lenert, Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of many ministries. But before that, you were a judge, a lawyer.
I was appointed as a health minister like only a few weeks before the pandemic became a subject.
Was there something behind the scenes that was harder than people realized?
The potential impact of every decision we took was just enormous.
Because I know there was the things we saw, but also the entire process behind the scenes.
Also the economic impact. We injected like billions into our economy to survive.
What is the number one trait a leader needs?
Sometimes you think that doubt is your enemy during a crisis, but it's not the doubt. It's when the clarity starts to miss.
What is your honest stand? What you wish that people understood better about women in power?
Well, this is also a subject I only discovered it when I was in the first line.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode on Female Empowerment, the podcast. My name is Simone, founder and host of the podcast and platform, and I am super excited to welcome today on this platform from Luxembourg, Paulette Lenert. Paulette, your career is absolutely incredible. Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of many ministries. But before that, you were a judge, a lawyer, and now an MP in the parliament, continuing the work in politics. Your career is fascinating, to say the very, very least. And I'm so excited to welcome you on this platform today.
Yes. Hello, Simone. I'm very pleased to be part of this podcast. I had the opportunity to listen to some of your further episodes, and I'm really fascinated about the initiative to make women speak. And of course, I'm very honored to be able to be part of it.
The honor is mine, and I'll go right into the deep dive. The first section of this podcast. Your career is anything but, I would say, not ordinary, but it's not like this step-by-step typical political career. As I mentioned, you're a lawyer, you were a judge. Then you became a minister and deputy prime minister. I have to ask, was any of this intentional, or did it feel like you were sliding into this career?
Well, it is definitely, it was not kind of a big picture I had for my professional career. I never started with kind of an ambition or a very precise idea of what I wanted to achieve in my professional life. It's kind of a sliding in, yes. It's opportunities that opened at certain times. And I guess I just have this very flexible character to be open towards any opportunity that's opening in front of me. And so I would just consider it. And if it sounds appealing, I would go for it. So it's always like a matter of seeing an opportunity pop up, having my own reflection, and then just decide, yes, this is going to be something that I could address for the next step, next part of my life.
The best opportunities arise when you don't expect them, right?
Exactly. It started with law, and obviously the legal law is something that can be useful to so many extents. So I never dropped that really, because to everything we do in society, you have kind of a legal aspect to it, and it's helpful. It's a tool.
But I have to ask, did you ever see yourself for early on as a leader, or mostly in a leadership position?
No, and that's maybe something specific to me, because I would qualify myself rather as an introvert, so quite a silent person. And I was never aspiring to be a leader. I have kind of a curiosity, which is probably my personal driver, but I never had pleasure in competition and competing. From that state of mind, I never had the ambition to be a leader in itself. It's something that grew kind of naturally, because I was confronted with tasks, quite difficult tasks, especially at the latest period of my professional life during the pandemic. Somehow, as I managed to handle these tasks, it's kind of natural leadership that grew out of that. But it's not at all a pleasure to me to be a leader. I don't have an affection towards power. I like to observe. I like to solve problems. I like to influence to a certain extent. If I have a conviction or an idea on something, I really seek to get my influence. But the power in itself, leadership in itself as a title, is not that appealing, no.
What would you say is the number one trait a leader needs to have, especially in the 21st century? And you mentioned during the pandemic and everything that came afterward, I kind of have the feeling it never stopped, especially in these uncertain times. What is the number one trait a leader needs?
I would say, also looking back at the difficult times during my career, that being able to step back, being able to face silence, being able to face uncertainty is definitely a skill that is very helpful, because the world is growing faster and faster, and there are expectations and lots of noise around you. And if you are in a capacity to switch off that noise for a moment, just to have your room, your reflection room, it's very helpful. If I have to advise people, I always advise to work on that part.
To have these times and quiet to reflect and sometimes rewind your life, your strategy, whatever you're doing at the moment. You mentioned the pandemic. You were health minister during that time. I can imagine it was a very, very challenging time. When was the moment where you first realized this is really serious, what we're in this environment we're in now, the situation?
Firsthand, I have to give the information that I was appointed as a health minister like only a few weeks before the pandemic became a subject. So I didn't expect it at all. I wasn't prepared at all. And already the fact of being a health minister was very challenging, as I have no background in public health. It was really a huge challenge. And then this pandemic out of a sudden popped up. I remember I've been skiing in Rosa in December 2019, and there was something going on in Asia, but you didn't even follow it as a headline in the news. And then it all came very suddenly. It was not that one cinematic event, I'd say. It was like a convergence of different indicators. Within a few days, you could see pictures of things happening very close to us on our continent, which you would never expect. I remember the pictures of Italy. They were kind of a wake-up call to me. But in parallel, you started to get data. You started to understand what the virus is about, what spreading means, what the potential risk is. So there was a lot of signs coming together, and they made it clear in a very short lapse of time that there's something really serious to come.
Which strength did emerge during this challenging time, or did you find in yourself?
Well, it reminded me of something I have grown up with, literally. I was born in my family as the youngest child. I have this reflex when things happen around me to step out somehow and just observe it as a phenomenon and put things together in my head to get the clarity. That's what I was trying to do, just get my mind clear and have all my intellectual capacity ready to understand what is happening, ready to understand what will be the priorities, who do you need to have on your table. Because when you know your administration or your ministry, you can rely already on some experience, and I didn't have that. So I had to be really quick on that. And I was so conscious that this will really throw me into a crisis mode and that I will have to accept the risk. I think it's very important to have the clarity in your mind is really dependent on your capacity just to leave out some fears, I'd say. And to me, it was really clear right from the start that this may fail, that you may just not know what to decide. Just accept uncertainty, accept that you may fail. And once you accept that, it opens up some freedom of mind in order to act, let out what you have as pragmatism and team building skills, which were quite important at that moment, to spot the right persons, to find the right mode, to organize yourself in a crisis unit. And also I decided for me to be personally present at every step, because I wanted to understand exactly what's going on and fully assume the decision I would have to take.
I mean, risk-taking, it's a topic I feel in general life we don't talk about enough. And also, as you mentioned, sometimes if you're aware that you might fail because we're still human beings, it lifts a weight off of our shoulders and we can see, and also it helps us to see more clearly. Was there something behind the scenes that was harder than people realized? Because I know there was the things we saw, but also the entire process behind the scenes, the decision-making process, the challenges. Was there something that was harder than people actually realize?
Yes, the trade-offs were high in a sense that you can hold on to data, onto figures, onto facts, but you realize that, at least I did realize, at every moment that behind these numbers, behind the facts, the data, the statistics, there are faces, there are human beings. The potential impact of every decision we took was just enormous on the human side, with potential people dying, not just one or two, but we were talking about hundreds and thousands potentially. Also, the economic impact was just enormous. I mean, we injected like billions into our economy to survive. And this was a huge challenge to have the awareness, not to be dumb about it, but on the other hand, not to be blinded emotionally by it. So it was harder than I expected, although I was somehow used to this from my former job, because if you move in different jobs, you always take something. And
Yeah.
so you will grow your skills, some lessons learned. You know, people always have this vision that law is precise and clear, but it's not. Law is about uncertainty. If everything was clear, we would not need laws. So law and courts are there because there is uncertainty. Rules are ambiguous because you have conflicting interests in society. It is a job that, if you take it from a philosophical point of view, it's just about navigating uncertainty. That was helpful because you have to be, on the one side, humble that you may take the wrong decision. But on the other hand, someone has to do it. Decisions have to be taken. There's tempo in the crisis. If you are unable to take decisions, you can't handle it. So you have to have this self-confidence that you will take a decision, knowing that it might be wrong or need readjustments, but you still have to do it. That requires you just to put emotions back from time to time. But on the other hand, I still feel it's important just to let them emerge, just to stay grounded and stay faced with reality.
I mean, they're part of what makes us human. But I have to say, I really like what you said about you have to take decisions. Because here's the thing, if you don't make the decision, the circumstances will. Time eventually will make a decision, especially in a crisis situation, yes? And it's sometimes I wish there was like a guidance or best practice guidance on how to take decisions, but it isn't. It's navigating through uncertainty. But then again, that's life sometimes too, right?
Yes, and it's a thing you have to accept it as a fact. You know, there's no perfect playbook to a crisis. A crisis, by definition, is something unexpected, something unprepared. There's no playbook, so it has its specific rules. And one of the rules is accepting to take decisions with what you have as information. So you have to gather a maximum and just try to sharpen your filters, because you have such a lot of noise from everywhere around you. The people in panic, fears, you have in your stuff, you have those who will just draw your attention to everything that might go wrong, and it's their job to do so. So you have all kinds of noise around you, and you have to develop. And I think you can only handle it if you have it somehow within your personal skills to be able just to switch off that noise and step back.
We talked about, having to step back when it gets noisy outside. What is your go-to practice or best practice when everything gets kind of noisy, overwhelming, to really, step back, and also mentally? I find it for myself absolutely difficult to step back mentally, and I'd love to hear some best practice guidance there.
Yes, that's true. It's already physical. So I took like every day some space for me, be in the morning, in the evening, just to go through the day to see what has happened. Am I okay with myself? It's very important that you have somehow developed a personal ethical compass towards yourself, and always check it. It may be subject to fluctuations, and I think you always have to check it again and again if you are okay with yourself. Can you assume what you have done? What do you have to do better the next day? What's on the agenda? And then I can somehow switch off in the evening and have my sleep. I managed to nearly during the whole pandemic, although we had a very, very heavy workload. But I think it's vital to be able to just have this ritual of going through the things, just deciding for yourself what is my basic checking frame, which I need to discuss with myself to have a day that is okay. Just admit that it is okay that you feel maybe helpless from time to time. And then just be aware that you need your sleep and love you and embrace it, because it's what restores you. So it's very important, and walking too. So
but that's really true what you say. You have to recharge your battery. After all, we're human beings. And, I always say when people say like, I always sleep like 5 hours. And I'm like, yeah, well, I don't think so. Maybe from time to time, you need 6 to 7 hours of good sleep. Because there's this myth that has been going around, high performers only sleep like 5 hours. And I'm like, okay, yeah, maybe. But after, from time to time, you need the 7 hours sleep to really and fully recharge as well.
But you're completely right. And I think that's something I definitely missed out during the pandemic, because I got my bill to that. I had a blackout at one moment because I didn't have the experience of such an intense period of crisis. It was exceptional. I mean, crises they have some characteristics. They're unexpected. There's no mode d'emploi, no rules before exactly. But normally they have a beginning and an end, and it's quite unusual to have this crisis mode going on over years, because it was lasting 3.5 years in the end. And so it was a lot of pressure. This is something I would do really differently next time. I didn't reflect on that long time period, because for me it was clear. I said, okay, I don't know when it will end, so waste energy on that. I completely forgot to be realistic and just on my time schedule say, okay, you have to have a real break from time to time. I didn't have that, and it was I was lucky to have a good end to it and survive all this. It was really stressful. Sometimes you think that the doubt is your enemy during a crisis, but it's not the doubt. It's when the clarity starts to miss, and you can only be clear in your mind when you are relaxed. So there's a moment where you really have to step back, and not just in your daily ritual, but really have a second next to you who will overtake for a moment. At a later time, I had a lot of people on the upper stuff in burnout at one moment, and some of them together at the same time, and that was really risky. We did not have a plan on managing that risk. That's something I learned, and that I really highly recommend to think of it in advance in an organization, that you cannot stand there alone over months and months and years, even, because it's just too much stress and adrenaline for the body.
There's a price you'll eventually pay. I completely agree. If I may ask, when you stepped down as Minister of Health, what was one of the first activities you did just to relax, to really completely unwind?
As I was completely new in politics, I didn't run elections before I became minister, because in Luxembourg you can be appointed as an expert into government. That was my case. I had to run my first elections after that as a leader, as a future eventual prime. So very stressful as well. And when it was over, we ended up in opposition, unfortunately, although we did quite a good job on the personal score and so on. Well, I wanted to slow down, and I took holidays or vacation. And then exactly that what happened is that I became sick at that point, as it is written in every book you read about it. It's just like 1 week after the stress, it just turned on, and I ended up with a chronic disease. I was quite bad for at least 1 year after that, and I just struggled back to my life and build up on my resilience again. That's exactly what happened. I have completely underestimated it. You just don't turn the page like this over such a long period of stress. You have to handle it, you have to manage it, you have to prevent it. You need to have a strategy, a real strategy to prevent this from happening, and I didn't have that.
Know your body and how it reacts. I want to go back a bit to women in power and also leadership. What is your honest stand? What you wish that people understood better about women in power?
Well, this is also a subject. I only discovered it when I was in the first line, as I said, because before in my professional career, I never sensed this different view on women in politics, because in the judiciary, there's a tradition. There's so many women in that profession. I couldn't really say that I could sense a difference, but in policy, yes, you are looked at differently. Expectations are different. It's a privilege somehow. I mean, we want to have more women in power, and you can have this role model and you can show that it is possible. But on the other hand, it's a burden. It's one thing more to handle. Every time you're out, I had this feeling that I'm like kind of the spokesperson for every woman. Well, I will do every step I take. People will say, well, this is the way women in plural act. Your individuality is somehow hidden behind this perception that you are just a symbol. You are like another quota. I hope that things will evolve in a way that this difference will not exist anymore, or the tone is different. When a man acts, it will be perceived as a strength. As a woman, you are immediately treated as hysterical or arrogant if you play powers. But here again, I think it's really helpful just to consider it as a fact, and then just consider it as one noise among other noises, and you just put on your filter and say, I don't care. I just do what seems right to me, what seems right in this moment, and my own personal compass of what I have to do. And you just don't care, because once you get into this game, it's not a virtual spiral. So it's better to just ignore it and do what you have to do. And I think we women will make our way and things will change.
To filter really what is important at the moment, we're being judged differently than men, mostly also in appearance, how we act, how we react. So filter what's important. I always say reflect if it's important, if it really, your own actions. And if it doesn't matter, let go of it. And so just move on. In your opinion, what is the skill set a woman in high influence position needs, that she really, really needs to acquire?
My experience is that we underestimate the value of trust. And this is bidirectional. If you honestly trust that people are up to complexity, if you take them with you, they will be able to do it. But if you have this misconception that people would just follow the loud and would just go for simple things and simplicity, I think then you generate it. My advice is be just confident that everybody is able to join you in complexity if there is complexity. I mean, we all have brains in our head. If you have this trust that people can follow you, they will also trust you, because if you just go for the loud and simple things, you're like animals just following a leader, but it has no thought. When you trust in people's capacity, you become kind of partners on an issue, and people would trust you in any other direction. I think it's just being open, transparent. The pandemic was really, for me, an enormous learning experience to that extent, because I never hid it when things were unclear. So, and that was perceived as very untypical for a politician, because I would ask questions and I would just say, well, I don't know, and then I would just explain what data I have, what information I have, and why. With these things on my table, I come to the conclusion that we should do this and that, being aware that there may be different options, and people could follow that, and they really appreciate it. Staying confident that people are up to complexity, if you are willing to let them in, and if you are willing to take them with you and just find the right words to do so.
That's just a marvelous statement, I have to say. The last question before we go into the more informal part of Fast Question and Answer, where we want to get to know you personally a bit better. One of the questions I have at the moment is success. How does it look to you now? After, you've been Deputy Prime Minister, you've been a minister, judge, lawyer, everything. What does success to you now, looking back?
Well, for me, success is not to regret things. For me, the success is when I can say, I don't know if I would do things exactly the same way, but I don't have really regrets, and I can, I'm aligned with what I am and what I stand for, with my values. It's very much about kind of a personal ethical compass. Everybody has his values. To me, it's very much about justice and fundamental human right for life and freedoms. As long as I can have the feeling that I'm in line with my values, and that hopefully I have added some piece on the way of strengthening them, it's okay. But I don't need the applause, to be honest. It's a good feeling to be appreciated, but these things can change so quickly, and especially in politics. One day you are hyped, and then some minor things may happen and people would dislike you. What does that mean? I mean, you are who you are, and you will have to stay with yourself till the end. So it's important to be clean towards yourself, I think, and your family and children. And that's the most important for me, not to feel ashamed in the evening when I go to bed and say, oh my God, you completely messed it up.
To like yourself, right?
Yeah.
Because you're going to be living with yourself the longest time. That is completely true. Wow, what a closing statement. I love it. What you said, trusting people, trusting the people around you that you work with, but also, to be clean and have inner peace about yourself, the person you are, what you did, what you plan on doing, everything. So I'm all the more excited to go into the fast Q&A section, where we, as I previously mentioned, want to get to know you personally a bit better. Right off, one thing people tend to always get wrong about politics.
I think people believe that we like to perform. I don't know if it's right or wrong, but what is wrong about politics, definitely from my point of view, is that it goes far too fast. I believe that most politicians in their inner self are much deeper than they are perceived.
there's always a personality, like a person behind
Yes,
it,
because there's a
personality.
pressure for this performance. It's like there are expectations that you have to do videos and statements and show up everywhere, even where you don't feel to be. And so I think politicians are much pressured into this role. As it is a very demanding job, I just keep this conviction that there's a real wish to do something good for the community at the beginning, at least. And if there was something in the beginning, you can always make it grow again. As long as there's a seed for something, I think there's hope that you can have it as a dominant trait in your character. I hope that there will be politicians in the future that will be able to switch off the noise, because with social media, I think it has just
going faster and faster.
It has just gone so fast. Yeah. And it's a real pressure. It's so time consuming, and the day has 24 hours. So, I mean, you cannot, if you really give in to all this pressure, where is the time for reflection? Where is the time for research, for reading, for deep dive? And challenges are extremely complex. So this is also underestimated. People think policy is easy, it's simple. It's not at all, because the challenges are so complex, so multi-layered. So it's very complicated issues we have to handle, and so we should be aware that we need time to do that properly.
A book, podcast, or article you recently read or listened to that made you change your view on an issue?
Well, I have recently, when I drove down to France, listened to that book, Factfulness. I don't know if you know that, by Hans Rosling.
No.
Unfortunately, he's not among us anymore. He was working in public health and is very much into data, and made it so clear how biased we all are, even experts and specialists. I had read it a long time ago, and I rediscovered it, and it's really like a reset. And it's even if you think to be a fact-based person, you realize, well, no, you are not. Everybody is really up to these BAs, and it's something you have to fight every day against yourself. And I really liked it, and I can really recommend it.
I'll definitely link it down below. Thank you for mentioning it. What is the most underrated leader skill or leadership skill?
Well, I may not surprise you after what I told you, but I think it's just a silence, because you think that you have to be loud and be the best one.
Have an opinion.
Yeah, and I think silence is so underestimated. It's so valuable. You can learn so much from silence, from nuances, from details. You need silence in order to see tiny details that may determine your strategy, actually.
What are meetings you love, or meetings you'd happily cancel?
I like very structured meetings with a clear outcome. You know what you are about. You are prepared and short. I don't like long meetings. I hate meetings. Well, I shouldn't say hate. It's a very emotional form of putting it. But these official meetings where everybody's there with his paper that is pre-drafted, and you just sit together and read out something that somebody else has prepared, and it doesn't fit into a dialogue, actually, because it's just like standalone readings, and I find that really I don't like it. It's I have the time I have the feeling to lose my time, because I would personally then prefer that people would send that over, and I could read all that stuff at home in my pajamas. Instead of sitting there and performing to be in a meeting and not being in a meeting, actually, just being a passive listener to something that has been prepared in advance, and there's no room for spontaneous interaction.
Same here. What's your go-to advice on productivity?
On productivity, I think you need a methodology to handle any problem you have to face. So it's like, again, listening, understanding, just letting loose on your prima facie convictions, and try to understand what is the issue exactly, why is it controversial, how do different opinions ground, what are the facts behind those opinions, and then be clear of the outcome you want. What is it? Do you need a solution? Do you just want to have an open reflection on a subject, or do you have to solve a problem? So you should always frame again your actions to that target and set clear timelines for that as well. Like, we have to come up with a solution within 4 hours. So let's split the time in order to give enough room to understand what we're about, and then to have different options, and in the end, just find a way to decide.
On a completely different topic, if you were ever to host a dinner with prehistoric people, who would they be?
I have. Yeah, I saw that you asked that. Very difficult. I am a fan of Winston Churchill, and may surprise you. I really admire his strategic decision making, the fact also that he took time for writing, and that he was up to combining psychology and logistics and so many different things in very complex times. I would like to exchange with him and know how he did to wind down and have his clarity. And I would combine him with women. I was thinking of Malala Yousafzai, this young Pakistani Nobel Prize winner, because I find it amazing that a young woman, she's such a good advocate for education, and I think education is key to all our human progress, actually. And to see this young girl just speak without hatred, she shows in her young age such a profound leadership to me. So
to move something,
I would
so
like to meet her.
fearlessly.
I don't know her. Yeah. And then there's another woman I really like, but I know her. It's Runa. I don't know if you know her. She's president and director of Friendship. It's an ONG. A Bangladeshi woman, and she's just fantastic. She is such a pragmatic woman. She finds solution to these flooded areas in Bangladesh, and I had the opportunity to work with her when I was the Minister for Development Policy, and I was just amazed by her sense of innovation and her energy. Such an wonderful woman, and I would although I know her and I have spent time with her, if I can choose, I would always choose to sit again with her. It's always just inspiring.
On a dinner party. I mean, come on, imagine the conversations one could have. Last but not least, which impact do you hope to leave behind?
I hope that I will have succeeded in strengthening and keeping upright humanistic values, which I find are really at stake nowadays. So very basic things like fairness, like equal rights for everyone. I know it's kind of an utopia to have it ultimately, but it's something you should strive towards. And I hope I could stand for and be reminded as someone who valued these values and stood for them. So like not giving in and falling into resignation at some time, but just staying to your values and stay straight till the end for them.
Yeah, wow. Thank you so much, Paulette. It was an incredible deep dive, but I also love the fast Q&A section where we got to know you personally. There are so many, aspects that you let us in from your experiences, from your lessons, but also how you see the world. And I find that incredibly inspiring. So thank you so much for taking the time. And I wish you all the best in what's still to come.
Well, thank you too for having me. And I'm very curious to follow up on the platform. It will definitely become one of my rituals to listen what other guests will have to say, and I find it very inspiring. So thank you very much for this opportunity again.